you. So the title of today's talk is God's Strategy. And we could also think of this as doing things God's way. But first I want to give you a recap, so to tie in with what's been happening this month. So for the last 2 weeks, we have been learning lessons from the life of Joshua, looking at the book of Joshua, which if you don't know is the 6th book in the Old Testament. So Nick started with Joshua 1 about growing disciples. Do you remember this? Vision 2025, growing disciples. Growing in our personal walk with God. Growing as disciples. Growing Grosvenor Church. People saved, becoming part of the church, becoming disciples. And last week, Ramon continued with a reminder of God's promises to Abraham, that Abraham's descendants would grow into a mighty nation. Later, God reminded Joshua that following the death of Moses, Joshua and the people should now move into and occupy the promised land. God told Joshua that no man would be able to stand against him all the days of his life. Only be strong and courageous. Look to the person next to you and say, only be strong and courageous. In these times, we need to be strong and courageous. So, I'm now talking to a congregation who are strong and courageous. That's going to be so much easier for me. We were encouraged to learn, like the Israelites, to depend on God, to believe in God, and to put God first instead of our own ideas, desires, and understandings. So today we're doing God's strategy, doing things God's way. So God not only gives us promises and vision, he also leads us in how to fulfill those promises. He has a strategy. And I just want to remind you what the difference is between vision and strategy, because sometimes we get a little bit confused. So vision is the end goal, the destination. So in this case, the promised land, the raising up of the Israelites into a nation, that was the vision, that was the end goal, that was the promise. Strategy is how you're going to get there. So in the case we're looking at, it was out of Egypt, through the Red Sea on dry land, surviving the wilderness, do you remember? Surviving the wilderness. And today, it's going across the Jordan and marching around Jericho. So, God's strategy does not mean we sit back and wait for God to do it all. I'm sure you're disappointed. Wouldn't it be lovely? I mean, sometimes we think, God, you do it. I'm here, I'm passive, you do it. But no, that isn't the deal, by the way. We have a part to play as well. I'm sure you realize that God doesn't need our help. He is sovereign and he can do exactly what he wants to do, when he wants to do it, and exactly the way he wants to do it. He does not need our help. He has his own timetable, but we have a part to play. Now, I don't know about you, but I find it absolutely amazing that the God of the entire universe, the creator of everything there is, the creator of me, the creator of you, wants me to play a part in his plans. Now, do you find that amazing, or is it just me? Really? Wow. He loves us, he cares for us, and he chooses to partner with us. Partnership does not mean that God does all the work, or that we do all the work. It means that we do the work together. Now, because I like participation, you now need to turn to your neighbour and say, it means that we do the work together. And I suppose that applies just as much to our church as us working in teams and doing things together as it does with us partnering with God. But anyway, the first principle is this. God has a strategy for us to follow. God does not need our help to achieve his purposes, but he chooses to partner with us. So far, so good. I think everyone's still awake. Up here, I can see if you drop off, so just be warned. Here comes the reality check. We have free will. I'm sure you know that, really. We're not forced to be part of God's plans and strategy. We choose to follow God's instructions or not. We choose to do our part or not. However, having a choice means that our choices have consequences. There is no neutral ground. I don't know if any of you like Bob Dylan, but he did come out with a Christian album called Slow Train Running. You may not know that because I don't know if he's buried it. There's a phase he went through. But in there was a song that said, there is faith, there is unbelief. There ain't no neutral ground. I can't really do the accent, but and that's true. You can have faith, you can have unbelief. There really is no neutral ground. We obey, we don't obey. We follow, we don't follow. We partner, we don't partner. The choice to obey and to trust God is ours. Now, I don't know did any of you sing this in Sunday school if you went to Sunday school? Yeah. Well, I mean, if I had more time, we would sing it. Oh, sorry. The worship band know this. And for people who are older, there is also a hymn that goes with this. But again, I'd love us to sing it, but we don't have time. So often you get the very solid truths when you're this high, don't you, in Sunday school. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to trust and obey. And our second principle is the choice to partner in God's strategy is ours. We choose whether to trust and obey or not. We choose. We are about to read Joshua 1, verses 1 to 11. A reminder of God's promise, I will give you every place you set your foot. A reminder of God's instructions, be careful to obey all the law. A statement of strategy, get your provisions ready, for in 3 days you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land. Here was the problem. At that time of year, the Jordan was in full flood. You know, you've all seen the floods, and I'm sure you've seen them in Wales and up in Manchester, you know, and you've seen cars floating and going away. Travel for all these people, men, women, children, goods, possessions, etc., going across a river in full flood. That was a suicide pact. That was not going to happen. So that's what they were being asked to do. Now, all of the people who were alive at that point, maybe there were some babes in arms, but the people themselves, with the exception of Joshua and Caleb, had not experienced going across the Red Sea. You will remember, perhaps because of their disobedience, they didn't get to actually come into the promised land. But they will have heard about it. But I think hearing about something isn't quite the same as experiencing it. Would you agree? So they are still thinking, that river's flooded, actually. But they're being told by the leaders, no, we're going across that. We're going across that. So let's read what happened. Joshua 1, 1 to 11. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. So the next slide. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. It couldn't be more clear, could it? But the Jordan's still flooded. So here is an example of obedience, crossing the Jordan. This reminded the Israelites of crossing the Red Sea while leaving Egypt. God delivered them from slavery by taking them through the Red Sea on dry ground. God fulfills his promise to bring them into a new life by taking them through the river Jordan on dry ground, but they have clear instructions about how to do this. And this is the amazing thing. The priests with the Ark of the Covenant, they went first. And it's only when the priest's feet entered the water that the waters parted and piled up. So it didn't happen like today, and right, we're going to do it tomorrow, and we can all see. We've got all our provisions, we're marching down, and the Ark of the Covenant and the priests are in the front. And it's still flooded, it's still flooded, it's still flooded. I'm going, ooh. Yes, are you going, ooh? Are you thinking, no, I'll be fine? And then when the priests put their feet into the water, that's when it happened. It was a risk. It took faith, but they did things God's way. So here's what happened. Any of you who've watched Monk on television will know what that's about. Here's what happened. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarenthon, while the water flowing down to the Sea of the Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. And then the waters came back. So here is another example of their obedience and faithfully following God's strategy for the capturing of Jericho recorded in Joshua 6. God gives them instructions which sound crazy. So for capturing Jericho, they had to walk around the walls of Jericho once each day for 6 days. The priests blew trumpets, but everyone was told not to say a word. What do you think of it so far if you were in the army? Okay? We're not speaking, we're walking around the city. They're all sort of sticking their tongues at us from the city, and if we go too close, no doubt they'll throw things at us. What is going on? On day 7, they marched around Jericho 7 times. The priests sounded the trumpets, and Joshua commanded all the Israelites to shout. The walls collapsed. The Israelites charged in and took the city. God miraculously gave them the city. God gave them a strategy. It seemed crazy, but they followed it. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about some of the things that God's asking you to do? It seems crazy, but are you going to follow it? Have you ever been asked to get up and speak to a stranger and say something about Jesus? It might seem crazy, but you do it. And then guess what? They've just been waiting for that. And something. Have any of you had this experience? Come on, I'm getting lonely now. Any of you had this experience where God's asked you to do something that seems crazy? Yeah? There are lots of examples. Unfortunately, I don't have time to tell you. So the second principle is the choice to partner in God's strategy is ours. The choice to partner in God's strategy is ours. We can choose whether to trust and obey or not. And they obeyed the Lord and crossed the Jordan when it was in full flood. They obeyed the Lord and the walls of Jericho came crashing down and they took the city. So here is the third principle. Our choices and actions always have consequences. Have you noticed that? Our choices and actions always have consequences. So you have free will. You can choose to obey God or not. But what we decide to do will have consequences. I know we don't like this. I know we would rather have the situation where we do what we like and there aren't any consequences, or certainly aren't any bad consequences. But actually, I'm afraid that's not reality. So we have just been reading how the Israelites and their leaders were reminded of God's promises, the vision, the strategy they were to follow, their obedience and the success that followed. They already knew the principle that their choices and actions always have consequences. They had already experienced negative choices leading to very bad consequences. That was when, for example, they worshipped the golden calf when Moses was up the mountain. And also their disobedience, which meant for 40 years they wandered in the wilderness. So all those people who'd been disobedient, apart from Joshua and Caleb, actually died in the wilderness and didn't go into the promised land. So there was no question that their disobedience, bad choices, had inevitable poor consequences. And I'll give you one example. There are 2 examples, but I'll give you one example. disobedience from Joshua 7, they had been told not to take the devoted things from Jericho. But a guy called Achan disobeyed. He took a beautiful robe, he took silver and gold, and he hid it in the ground inside his tent. So they decided, after all this success in Jericho, they would go up and they would attack a city called Ai. And confident of their success, they didn't inquire of the Lord. They didn't take the whole army. They only took part of it. And guess what? They were badly defeated. Joshua does not appear to have asked for God's guidance here until after they had lost the battle. And then God revealed the sin of Achan. Joshua led the people in repentance, and it didn't work out well for Achan and his family. But they didn't learn the lesson. Later on, there was some Gibeonites who came, and they thought, well, we better make friends with these guys, make a treaty with these guys. But how to do it? So they came up with a deception where they had mouldy bread, and they changed their good clothes for worn-out clothes, and they pretended they come from a long, long way away. So when the Israelites said to them, well, maybe you're close to us, they go, no, look, mouldy bread and all the rest of it. But they didn't ask the Lord. They didn't stop and inquire of God. And therefore, a treaty was made, and again, there were consequences. They didn't stop to ask for God's guidance. Now, we often need to stop and pray. We need to discern what God is saying. So a fourth principle is this. If you want to see things happen, cry out to God in prayer, both individually and as a church. Let me repeat that. If you want to see things happen, cry out to God in prayer, both individually and as a church. Now, if I just switch to the next slide, this is a chance to experience God's presence, to cry out as a church. This will have appeared in e-news by now, and I think it was on a slide earlier. In your diary, Sunday, 2nd of February, refreshments at 5:30. The event starts at 6. Elevate are joining with us, or we're joining with Elevate, or we're all joining together. It's for the whole church family. That's one way we can corporately cry out to God. If you can be there, please be there. I also at this point want just to say thank you to the team who actually pray so faithfully for Alpha. Every time we meet with Alpha, there is a team upstairs praying for the people who are on Alpha, and led by Peter and Jenny Bounds. Could you just wave if you've prayed on that team? Thank you so much. I think we should give them a quick clap because they're... If you want to join that team, Peter will be wandering around by the welcome desk on my left afterwards, and he could tell you all about it. But thank you for being faithful prayers in that. Fifth principle, we need to discern what God is saying to his people now, both individually and as his church. We decided we would just do a little recap on one or two words that we'd received in the last 3 months. Just let's look back on how we started talking today, the vision for 2025, growing in our personal walk with God, growing as disciples, growing Grosvenor Church, people saved, becoming part of the church, becoming disciples. And we have if I could just go on to the next slide now, if we meet on a Monday, we have a kind of drop-in, we call it First Fruits. It's between 7 and 9. People turn up at any time between 7 and 9. And over the last 3 months, we've been looking at a word from Isaiah and a word from Matthew. So I'll just share a little bit of that with you. Firstly, Isaiah 54. This links in with what Nick was talking about with the vision, growing Grosvenor. Sing, barren woman, you who never bore a child. Burst into song, shout for joy, you who were never in labor, because more are the children of the desolate woman than of her who has a husband, says the Lord. Enlarge the place of your tent. Stretch your tent curtains wide. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords. Strengthen your stakes, for you will spread out to the right and to the left. Your descendants will dispossess nations and settle in their desolate cities. So this is a prophetic word relating to the restoration of Israel from captivity. However, it can also be a now word. A now word is a word that God's giving us, which may have come from the Bible, often has, but it actually has a now application for us. And therefore you can see the link, because let's be honest, if you haven't got enough people to fill your existing tent, why would you want to make your tent bigger? Why would you want to strengthen the poles of your tents? Why would you want to stretch out your cords further? Why are we saying that all these people are going to come? Pray, barren woman, shout for joy, because there are going to be children. There are going to be many, many children. Now, just look around. Can you see any empty spaces in the church? Right, okay. But God is saying we're going to grow. Can you see what God is saying, or maybe saying through this? That actually, yes, we're going to enlarge our tents. We're going to plan for growth. We're going to get excited about growth. Oh, but there are spaces. There are now. But that's the point, isn't it? With God and in God's kingdom, all things are possible. 5 loaves, 2 fish, 5,000 people are hungry. What are you going to do about it, guys? Yes, you're going to give them to Jesus and ask him to multiply what's in your hands. Can you do that? Can you give what you have to Jesus and ask him to multiply what's in your hands? If you do, by the way, there will be 12 baskets left over. So maybe we'll have to build an extension at the side, I don't know. So, what's the application for us? If we do our part, God will bring the increase. But in particular, we must cry out to him. Lord, bring us revival. Renew our hearts, O Lord. Teach us how to be disciples of Jesus and disciple makers. Renew our hearts, Lord. May we long for this. Do you want your heart to long to see his kingdom come, to see growth? However, more people will bring more change and more work. I'm worried that no one's smiling at this point. Yes, more change and more work. Okay, I'll carry on then. Pray, if this is of God, that he will bring the increase. But we must play our part. Do you remember all the strategy we talked about earlier? How we partner with God. We play our part. What does it mean for me, Lord? How can I lengthen my cords and strengthen my stakes? Here are just a few random examples. As a people, we must become even more serious about crying out to God in prayer. All of us know that previous generations of this church have faithfully done it. We all know. When I first came to this church, and some of the older generations, I mean, they knew their Bible back to front and inside out. And they faithfully prayed. When there were prayer meetings, they were always there. So we know that we have a heritage of prayer. But what about my generation? What about your generation? I understand now now we have to talk about which letter of the alphabet you belong to. I'm not sure which letter I am, Z, X, Y. I think I'm a double J. I'm just only me in it at the moment, but never mind. Whatever generation you're in, it doesn't matter. This is not for older people. This is for us all. We need to cry out to God. If you are from a different nation, help us to connect with you. Can you explain to us how we can better communicate with you, include you? What is your part to play in all this? We want to partner with you. You want to partner with us. How can we make you feel loved and welcome? Please come and talk to us. Tell us what we can do. And all of us, let's embrace change. Let's pray together that growth is coming. So the next now word was from Matthew 5:14 to 16. And this is what it says. Jesus taught his disciples, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Note here, Jesus says, "You are the light of the world." Now, we know that Jesus is also described as the light of the world, but he is saying, You are the light of the world. Now, because at this point, because you know that I'm probably getting towards the end and you're getting a bit lethargic, you need to turn to the person next to you and say, you are the light of the world. A lot of finger pointing going on here. No fighting, I'm fighting church. We are meant to be visible, not hidden, right? We're meant to be visible, not hidden. There may come a day when this will not be possible without being arrested. It's not as fanciful as all that. But that day is not this day. It may be coming, but that day is not this day. So we are a light on a hill, a lamp on a stand. We are designed so that people can see. Can see what? Can see Jesus, his life, his love, his forgiveness. They can see Jesus through our light, and Jesus partners with us to show them the amazing new way of living from here into eternity and by having a relationship with him. Now, I'm going to say finally, because that's when statistics show that everybody starts listening. Are you ready? Finally, there is a sense of urgency about all this. It is normal in a church such as Grosvenor, there will be differences of worldview. However, whatever your worldview, whatever your politics, whatever your eschatology, we all feel a sense of urgency. In any event, I don't know how long I'm going to live. You don't know how long you're going to live. I can't leave it, guarantee, I'm going to definitely do this tomorrow, because I may or may not be here tomorrow. We don't know how long our friends, neighbours, families are going to live. We don't know. The fact that it's urgent does not mean that you should become Bible bashers, right? We remember what it says in 1 Peter 3. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect, right? But, we need to take these things seriously, especially in the place of prayer. Now, you will notice there's a picture of a burning fire on the screen behind me. And I am lifting this verse out of context, but I felt God bring to my attention a number of times Zechariah 3, verse 2, where he says, is this not a man? This was a vision that Zechariah was having about Joshua, different Joshua the high priest, but the word I kept getting was, is not this man a burning stick snatched from the fire? Is not this man a burning stick snatched from the fire? So there is a renewed sense of urgency about sharing our faith, helping people to become disciples of Jesus and disciple makers. There's a new sense of urgency. Not Bible bashing, not listening to the prompting of the Spirit, but an urgency. Do not put off to tomorrow what God is calling you to do today. There is a sense of urgency. If what you believe is true, if it's going to have that much impact on people, then it's really, really important. Would the musicians come up, please? It's really, really important that we take the now words and put them into action today.